Hi everybody, welcome to Tommy Chris TV. This is another edition for you, and this time we feature our very special guest, Thomas Welsh. He's an author of a great book called Classic Restaurants of Youngstown. I know you're going to enjoy this show. Stay with us. Tom, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming
thank you,
by.
Tom. Appreciate it.
Your book, Classic Restaurants of Youngstown, it's a fabulous book.
Oh, thank you.
And I urge everybody in the Youngstown area that has any history at all here and that loves our city to read this book. Because it's not just about restaurants, it's about history. And it incorporates all those elements based on a lot of ethnic diversity.
Oh, absolutely.
In our city.
Absolutely. The community's role as a center steel production had a lot to do with the fact that our community has a great deal of diversity, both in terms of ethnicity, in terms of race, and in terms of culinary traditions. And all of that was reflected in the kinds of restaurants that emerged in Youngstown. And of course, the Italian-American cuisine has always been foremost in people's minds.
Here.
But there were many Greek Americans involved in the restaurant industry. Wonderful traditions of Southern cuisine that were brought here by African American migrants from the South, and Eastern European foods that are being showcased now to a greater extent than they were in the past in formal settings like restaurants. But we've been very blessed in that regard.
Now, would you say the Depression era was probably the era that initiated a lot of the restaurant growth in Youngstown, or World War II? Which one was it?
Well, I'd say what was surprising about the Depression era was, and we of course opened in 1945, but we look back at the Depression era because whether or not it was a period in which you saw a tremendous expansion of the restaurant industry, you certainly did not see decline. And that's significant. You would think that with the contraction of the economy, with the shutdown of many of the steel mills at various times, that the restaurant industry would have declined. Instead, you saw radical expansions of downtown restaurants, including the Star Oyster House, including its Raver's Restaurant. We're talking $25,000, $50,000 renovations. You also saw a great deal of experimentation during the Depression era. The introduction of hamburger joints, if you will, hamburger restaurants of the kind that flourished in the western United States, in places like California. And some of those innovators included Harry and Fay Melkoff, who were most famous for the 20th century, which opened later in 1942.
Yes, the Melkoffs were a very prominent name in your book. It came up in a lot of different places.
And I think justifiably, people absolutely love the 20th century restaurant, which operated again from the early 40s into the mid 1980s. And for most of that time, it was under the operation of Harry and Fay Melkoff, who were true innovators. Harry was, I guess you'd say, the front end man. You know, he was the one who really made people feel at home. As his son said, he could talk to people about absolutely nothing and be thrilled. You know, I mean, he was a social creature. And Fay, on the other hand, was the person who could taste something and break down the ingredients to the point that she could recreate it and improve it. And both of them were well traveled. And that was reflected in the fact that the 20th century restaurant's edifice was a classic example of beach deco. In other words, the kind of restaurant you'd see in a Florida resort community.
Well, the Melkoffs were trendsetters, I think, back in those days.
Absolutely.
And they opened up another place. Was it the El Morocco that they had something to do with?
The El Morocco was one of their failures, but it was an ambitious failure. I mean, it was an upscale restaurant that was modeled on the kind of New York restaurant in which fashionable young women would walk onto the dining floor with these silver trays filled with entrees, with options that the customers could choose.
Wow.
As Kurt Melkoff, their son, put it, it worked very well in New York, but not in Youngstown.
Yeah.
And but what's interesting about the demise of the El Morocco is what it was replaced with. On the side of the El Morocco opened one of the most beloved fast food restaurants, if you will. It wasn't a chain, but it certainly offered what we would call fast food, and that was the Golden Drumstick.
Fascinating and charming thing about reading this book was there wasn't a restaurant that you mentioned that I hadn't either heard of or been to.
Yes.
Picture of the Wickwood.
I believe it's now the site of the parking lot for First Presbyterian. But one restaurant in Youngstown that offered New York and LA levels of food was the Mural Room.
And shows, too. My parents used to take me there to the ballroom to see shows.
Yes. The space was used, in fact, when the restaurant wasn't operating, the space was used for wedding receptions and other events, political rallies, what have you.
Right.
But sadly, one of the many spaces that no longer exist, but people have very fond memories of it. Now, one of the challenges, and I did want to sneak this in, one of the challenges we had in writing this book, as you can imagine, is that there was so much rich material that we had to squeeze it into a format that is supposed to be about 38,000 words. And I did bring an outtake. It's called The $1 Million Mansion, which operated just beyond the city limits in Liberty Township. It was the old Wick Estate, one of the old Wick Estates. And I'll just read that section.
Sure.
And give you a sense of how the kind of embarrassment of riches we encountered when trying to put this book together.
How about volume 2?
Volume
That
2
would've
will
worked.
probably have to cover Niles, Struthers, Boardman.
Why not?
But Warren, absolutely, absolutely Warren. Yes. In fact, I was just at the Saratoga.
Because there's,
You know,
you can't, a book this size, you can't possibly put
no,
everything you want in this, in a book this size.
some of the material may find its way into other books too, but this was
Sure.
basically what Harry. We said the city boasted scores of additional entertainment spots, including the Sky Restaurant Cocktail Lounge, located downtown. These were all places that weren't given the kind of mention they deserved. The Elms Ballroom on the north side, the Bluebird and the Trocadero, both on the west side, and the Chateau in the Tropics, both located on the south side. The community's most unique nightclub, however, operated in a rarefied neighborhood just north of the municipal and county lines. Standing on a leafy stretch of Logan Avenue, just west of the Youngstown Country Club, the $1 Million Mansion offered patrons a unique entertainment environment, while also providing them with a glimpse into the lifestyle of the community's industrial barons. This was a nightclub that was located, and this is a quote, "This was a nightclub that was located in the most delightful building I've ever seen, and I've traveled all over the world," recalled Harry Michel, who was a recent graduate of East High School when the club opened in the 1940s. "It was the old Wick Estate. It was built of specially cut Italian stone, and the interior was covered with beautiful wood paneling. Not long after the Wick family's departure from the three-story mansion, the lease for the building was taken over by entrepreneur Tony Cavalier, owner of the Elms and Idora Park Ballrooms. Tony Cavalier converted this building into a nightclub and ballroom," Michelle explained. "There was a stone veranda in the back of the mansion, which held maybe 50 tables, with a bar at either end. Then you'd walk down this sumptuous staircase, and it led to a huge tiled dance floor that was out in the open. And at the far end was a band shell. They called events held at the mansion Dancing Under the Stars. That's how it was advertised." An ardent lover of jazz, the then 17-year-old Michelle didn't mind working around the clock for a quarter an hour as a bartender and occasional maintenance man. The name bands, and even some of the lesser-known bands, would come there. Almost every band imaginable, he recalled. The Ink Spots were there, the Andrews Sisters, and the remnants of the Glenn Biller Band. You name the bands, and they were there. With the estate's numerous bedrooms and ample kitchen, Cavalier was able to offer room and board to visiting musicians, an arrangement that created further opportunities for young staff members to interact with their musical idols. "There was so much enjoyment there. Honest to God, I didn't care whether they paid me or not," Michelle recalled. "I met the King sisters there. I played craps with the Ink Spots in the kitchen and won a quarter off of them." He added that one teenage co-worker, Chester Crumpler, developed a musical career of his own and went on to sing briefly with the Duke Ellington Band. And I think that's all we can do right now, but that gives you a sense of the material we had to cut.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And that's Harry's own excerpt.
That's basically from an interview with Harry Michel, and it was one of many quotes that ended up on the cutting room floor, so to speak.
Take us through a brief history, let's say post-war.
Sure.
Restaurant business in downtown, its exodus and all that stuff up to the uptown area and so on and so forth.
Well, what happened in Youngstown was characteristic of what happened throughout the United States, although it was particularly evident in the Northeast. And that was the And at the end of World War II, you saw a variety of trends that contributed to suburbanization. And one of them was the introduction of the interstate highways. Even before that, you had the GI Bill, which provided returning veterans with an opportunity to secure cheap housing, most of which was in the suburb, very little of which was within the city limits. In fact, veterans were discouraged from either refurbishing or building homes within the city limits. With the I guess with the reconstruction of Europe and the reconstruction of Asia following World War II, we found ourselves in this community, and we were certainly not the only community in this position, but we found ourselves with antiquated industrial infrastructure.
Right.
Whereas Germany, Japan, so many countries that had been, essentially devastated by the war.
The places that we blew to smithereens,
That's right.
We rebuilt.
We rebuilt and or assisted in the rebuilding, and in any case, they had state-of-the-art technology. We were working around archaic 19th century plants, trying to refurbish them. And of course, with the introduction of the interstate highway system, railroad transportation became almost obsolete. And of course, Youngstown, like most communities, was built along the railroad. The steel mills were built along the railroad. The restaurants within the downtown area depended on railroad transportation. Indeed, semis of the kind that became more prevalent and became pivotal in transportation later on couldn't even navigate, the kinds of alleys and narrow streets that you have in the downtown area. So you had so many factors that contributed to the decline of the downtown. In addition, I think that many restaurateurs realized there was an advantage to moving to the southern part of the city because townships like Boardman had dry laws, and residents of places like Boardman and Poland Township would come to restaurants just over the border in order to have not only a good meal but also spirits. Okay.
Well, now Boardman's dry law is still in place, sort of, isn't it? I mean,
not to the extent but there are many exceptions to that. Obviously, you can have a drink in many restaurants in Boardman, so that advantage became diluted over time. And but I think obviously one of the big factors in the decline of independent restaurants in Youngstown came with the industrialization, and that created real challenges for small business people in general. Who and to look at, we had a population in 1945 of anywhere from 160, it's fluctuated, but 168,000 to 170,000. Today it's 62,000.
62,000.
So we're talking
last
about
census 2010 probably is what that number would be.
Right. So it may have declined further. So we're dealing with a very different community than what we saw in 1945, and of course, even one of the real symbols, I think, of the decline of the downtown entertainment district was the closing of the Mural Room in 1970.
Tell us about the Black Monday at the Golden Dawn.
Oh, there's a wonderful section of the book that deals with the news coverage that took place at the Golden Dawn, and Carmen Naples was my primary source for that. And he said that when the story broke on the national news, one of Ralph Naples' sons, who was living in Atlanta, turned on the morning news, saw his father Ralph talking about the closing of Youngstown Sheet and Tubes plant in Camel, and actually dropped his cup of coffee. But these were places in which you were likely to find everyone from the owner, people who were on the board of directors of these steel plants, to the people who swept the floor. Everyone was in these restaurants, and
for some reason the Golden Dawn became a hub for election news too. A lot of people would announce their victories there.
Well, one of the keys to the Golden Dawn, because if you think about the potential hazards of operating a tavern, you think of fights.
Oh yeah.
You think of kind of unruliness that makes this, a risky kind of destination. And one of the traditions that was established right from the start by Andrew Naples was that everyone behind the bar wore a shirt and tie, and that if you were going to patronize that establishment, as Carmen Naples said, you better behave yourself.
And probably there was probably somewhat of a dress code there too, I would imagine.
I think there was definitely a tendency to, they created an environment in which people didn't get the feeling that they were slumming.
Right.
And this was a challenge because some of the older customers had been, remembered the days of the saloon culture before Prohibition. And at certain times, he even had to tell some of his older customers, don't spit on the floor, go outside or go in the hall. We're talking about pretty rough crowds. So, but he himself not only wore a shirt and tie, but this kind of resplendent white bar jacket. So very elegant figure.
I like that kind of stuff. I know most people don't nowadays, but I respect that kind of the image that they wanted to project there.
Well, I think there have been, my dad taught public school for years and years. He passed away a couple of years ago, but he said that when public schools had dress codes, kids were less likely to get into altercations. I think there is and whether or not that's true, I don't know, but I think there is when people went to public spaces, like department stores and banks, dressed well, there was a reflection of pride that you don't see today. I mean, you go to public spaces today and you'll see people in running pants.
Right.
You'll see people with who look like they just rolled out of bed, and I can't help but think that plays into the way they interact with other people.
Hopefully, I think today's even department stores today still have somewhat of a dress code. Some of them require the women to wear all black uniform types of things, and then the men have to wear the suits and sport jackets or whatever, and a tie, and I think that's still in place, isn't it?
Well, I think in many department stores, yes, but on the whole, as a society, we have, for better or worse, embraced a more casual approach to dress.
Absolutely.
And
you're right.
but there was something that's been lost
too casual.
There is something that's been lost. There's no doubt about it. The sense of going out, being an occasion, that's been lost to some extent.
Right. You go to weddings now, and you see people in blue jeans and T-shirts at weddings.
Oh, in church?
At church.
On the altar. I mean, it's, and again, I think that people who, I don't know, espouse that more casual approach to dress, they have a point too, I'm sure, but they want to undercut the kind of formality that maybe was part of their upbringing.
Yeah, but once in a while, it's nice to get gussied up, don't you think?
I do think that again. I do think again the fact that people did dress up to go shopping, did dress up to go to restaurants, made that more of a special occasion. Sure. I don't think there's any question about it.
I remember my mom when I was little. We used to get on the bus and ride to Youngstown on the bus from Warren. And she'd get all gussied up. She'd short dress and heels and hat with a pin in it and the veil down over her face. And makeup, and it was like a very special occasion to go to.
Well, my brother-in-law was actually, up until recently, involved in the dry cleaning business. And one of the things that you don't really think about, but the dry cleaning business in this country has virtually disappeared because people, if people dress formally, it's because they rented a tux.
Yeah.
For a wedding.
But on the other hand, dry cleaning has gotten very expensive.
And one of the reasons it's become expensive is because the reservoir of customers has contracted dramatically.
Right. So, exactly right.
So, but we have become for better or worse, have become a more informal society, and that is certainly reflected in some of the changes recorded in this book.
Well, take us up to present-day downtown.
Well, that was one of the nicest things about speaking of positive developments, and there have been many, thankfully, in Youngstown, is that we didn't have to write a book that was entirely elegiac, that talked about the good old days. Gordon and I were actually advised to write a book with a working title, Lost Restaurants of Youngstown, which we considered to be thoroughly depressing. But in any case, we were pushed in the direction of writing about restaurants that had closed. And it occurred to us that that's really not the whole story in Youngstown, especially since the whole series of developments that led to the redevelopment of the downtown. Those included tearing out the mall, the plaza, which was a very well-intentioned but disastrous effort to revitalize downtown Youngstown.
You mean
and it was
putting it in place?
putting it in place,
Right.
okay, because people, for whatever reason,
Yeah.
valued being able to drive through the center of downtown.
Yeah, I
and-
never understood that.
Well, I think it was not only in Youngstown. It was done in Philadelphia. It was done in communities throughout the United States, and I think it was an effort to recreate the European piazza.
Oh, okay.
But what it contributed to in places like Youngstown, given some of the economic changes that we've seen in recent years, is vagrancy. You had a lot of people, homeless people, gravitated to
The square.
You had
Plus, it impeded traffic.
yeah,
The flow of
people
traffic.
people did not respond for a whole variety of reasons.
Right.
So the securing the funds to tear out that plaza was essential to the redevelopment of the downtown. There were funds secured for the Cavelli Center, and now we're seeing the development of well, not only the expansion of the Dior Center, but also the development of high-end apartments in downtown. And this will eventually, one hopes, support the development of the whole range of business, the whole complement of businesses that we associate with a functional downtown. And that is not just novelty businesses like restaurants, high-end restaurants and taverns of the kind we have now, but also dry cleaners, pharmacies, what you would expect to see when you go downtown, the kinds of businesses that people need for in their daily lives. And so I think that's one trend that could spell the complete revitalization of the downtown.
Well, I haven't done any research on this, but I have heard that the Realty Building downtown now is the site of a new hotel. I don't know what kind of land parcels are available over there, but I thought with the development of the Cavelli Center, that you'd see a lot more people gravitating to that part of the downtown area.
Not to the extent that many people had hoped, because
Yeah.
of course, when one of the people I spoke to was George Mager, who opened up the Cafe Cimento, which was a high-end gourmet Italian
Right,
restaurant.
I remember.
And,
It's closed now, right?
It's closed, and,
Yeah.
and I understand that Los Gallos, which took that space, has also closed that particular branch. People tend to patronize the restaurants in West Federal. And I think part
Yeah.
of what happened too, I think I don't know, I mean, I'm speculating here, but I think part of what happened was that in the wake of urban renewal, much of the distinctive architecture of the eastern part of the downtown was raised. And so
Yeah.
that part of the city lost a good deal of its character too.
Okay, yeah,
So
sure.
that may be a factor, but I think that also, if you look at how the West Federal Street developed, a lot of younger restaurateurs, younger entrepreneurs decided to throw in at the same time, recognizing that if we're all here, rather than playing a zero-sum game where we're all competing, engaged in this brutal competition, if we're all here, it's mutually beneficial.
Right.
And I think the fact that there are already so many businesses on the western part of Federal Street has benefited restaurateurs who moved in later.
I didn't get a chance to read this book, but I love the picture. I love the
Oh, thank you, yeah.
the picture on the front of
The
it.
book, we basically relied very heavily on the Mahoney Valley Historical Society. We were pleasantly surprised in the way the book turned out, because I think we suspected that it would be a nostalgic look at Strauss's, focusing primarily on the mezzanine, the Thanksgiving parade, and the Strauss's malt. And what we found instead was this rich and inspiring immigrant story, because we traced the development of the store from the 1880s to the present, and of course the genesis of Strauss's department store is closely tied to the saga of a German Jewish immigrant by the name of Isaac Strauss, who came here as a teenager, was taken under the wing of a distant cousin,
There's a wonderful picture
And
of the Strauss store. I think it's a Strauss store. Yes, Strauss Hirschberg's in those days.
Right.
And I remember that name.
Can you open that more?
Yeah. It's basically the same picture that's on the cover, but a different angle.
When the store opened, Clarence Strauss arranged for a commercial pilot to circle the square, central square, and to drop a wreath outside of Strauss's department store, which was then retrieved by Mayor Scheibel, who presented the wreath to Clarence Strauss. It didn't work out exactly as planned because the wreath became caught on the cornice of one of the buildings, but...
What was the purpose of dropping it from a...
Well, I think airplanes, of course, were all the craze in the 1920s, so I think
okay.
I think the idea of having this pilot circle the plaza generated a lot of excitement, but I think also it was a reflection of the fact that this was a state-of-the-art building at the time. We're talking about a building that featured pneumatic tubes, which were not that common in department stores at that time. And
So the reef went down the Jay's Hot Dogs chimney then, down into the hot dogs, or what happened to the reef?
the wreath ended up on the cornice of the building, and Clarence Strauss or someone connected to the store had to instruct a staffer to retrieve it. So it was not as dramatic as they'd hoped, but it was nevertheless a reflection of how important this was to the community, that you had the mayor on hand for the grand opening, that you had this spectacle. In fact, I think it might have been the city that had that arranged for the commercial pilot to drop the wreath. But it was
It's a clever idea, but too bad it didn't work out. But, I mean, it
Well, it's a
doesn't
nice
matter.
photo opportunity.
Yeah.
From this distance, we weren't there, but it was nevertheless a real reflection of the fact that this was a public event that people were excited about.
You are the sweetest soul I've ever known. I wanna hold you close and never let go. Oh, one in a million you. I can't believe that I'm a lucky one, 'cause I found you. So cold, I can feel the warmest breeze. If I could be so bold, could you stay a while? 'Cause you are the sweetest soul I've ever known. I wouldn't have the thought of letting you go. I think of you, the one that dried my eyes when the world was blue. One day you return, I will feel you in my heart. I'll always remember you as the sweetest song.